4 children's sleepover cupcakes still sat on the kitchen counter when police stepped into 18 Chandos Crescent, yet every person inside the house was already dead. What happened between bedtime and sunrise in the village of Killamarsh? September 18, 2021 was supposed to be ordinary for Terri Harris, 35, and her kids. Terri's boyfriend, 31-year-old Damien Bendall, lounged on the sofa scrolling his phone, while 13-year-old John-Paul Bennett played FIFA in the living room. Upstairs, 11-year-olds Lacey Bennett and her school friend Connie Gent laid out pajamas and glitter nail polish for a Saturday night sleepover. The two girls spent the afternoon baking cupcakes, pink icing, silver sprinkles, ready for Sunday lunchboxes. Outside, late summer rain misted over the quiet Derbyshire estate. Neighbors closed curtains and settled for the night. Phone data would later reveal Bendall's mood was far from calm. At 21:42, he fired off a text to his regular dealer asking for 2 white, street code for cocaine. The dealer never replied. Bendall tried again at 21:46, swearing about "need it now." No response. Prosecutors believe the unanswered messages sparked a rage that detonated inside the house minutes later. Terri had tucked Connie and Lacey into bunk beds just before 2200. John-Paul, gaming headset still on, shouted goodnight and promised to switch off soon. Terri went downstairs, joining Bendall for a late-night cigarette under the back porch. No one knows what was said. What is known, Bendall retrieved a claw hammer from the utility drawer. Police later confirmed it belonged to Terri's DIY kit, and stepped back inside. The assault began in the hallway. Terri took the first blow, collapsing beside the doorway leading to the lounge. Post-mortem reports later showed she suffered catastrophic skull fractures. Hearing the noise, John-Paul rose from the sofa. He was struck multiple times before he could reach the stairs. Bendall then moved upward, methodical and silent. In the girls' room, he attacked Connie first, then Lacey. Evidence indicated both girls were asleep or half awake. Lacey's injuries were later classified as defensive. Small bruises on her arms suggested she raised her hands in confusion or instinct. The hammer blows were lethal regardless. Digital forensics placed the spree within a 15-minute window. By 22:05, 4 bodies lay inside the 3-bedroom semi-detached house. Bendall, soaked in blood, used Terri's phone to search the internet for bus timetables to Sheffield and pawnshop hours for Sunday morning. He then lit a cigarette, opened a beer from the fridge, and wandered room to room. At 23:23, he Googled "how many life sentences UK?" At 011, he typed "prison time for murder if plead insane." No call for help, no sign of remorse. Dawn crept over Killamarsh while cupcakes on the counter dried into sugar crusts. At 07:26, Lacey and John-Paul's father, Jason Bennett, texted, "Morning, how was sleepover?" No reply. He tried again at 8:30, then rang Terri. Phone rang out. At 9:13, Jason called Derbyshire police, asking for a welfare check. He'd had a nightmare, and something feels wrong. Patrol Car Unit 3 was dispatched at 9:37. Constables burst through the unlocked front door at 9:47. Bendall met them in the hallway, cigarette in hand, shirtless, blood smeared on chest like war paint. Calmly he said, "I've done something bad." Officers pushed past and saw Terri's body first, then John-Paul half under a blanket. Upstairs, they found the 2 girls. Radios erupted with code words no officer wants to transmit: multiple fatalities, child victims, violent trauma. The crime scene team cataloged horror in clinical detail. Hammer beside the bunk bed, wiped once on a towel. Shoes in the porch, soaked red. Bendall's phone showing 4 attempts to reach the cocaine dealer between 21:42 and 21:53. Every victim struck at least twice. None bore defensive wounds, except Lacey. Investigators would later note the attack's grim efficiency. 5 blows, 4 murders, no smashed furniture, no screams heard by neighbors, just soft thuds against walls. Why did Bendall erupt? Prosecutors pieced together motives: mounting drug debt, paranoia over phone calls, jealousy towards Terri's happy children. But the spark that night appears simple. He wanted cocaine and couldn't get it. Cocaine, says a chief inspector, was the fuse on an unexploded personality. Muse vans rolled into Killamarsh by noon, cameras panning over a police cordon and tear-streaked locals leaving flowers. Reporters called it one of Derbyshire's worst family murders in decades. Social media filled with photos of smiling Lacey on a pony, Connie in Halloween makeup, John-Paul clutching a football trophy. By evening, vigils sprung up on the estate. Parents hugged children tighter, wondering how bedtime routine could flip to nightmare without warning. What would you notice if a friend's messages turned desperate after dark?
This first chapter sets the stage. 4 lives gone in minutes. A hammer wielded by a man spiraling over drugs and rage. In the next part, we'll rewind through Damien Bendall's violent history, parole missteps, domestic abuse warnings, and the cascading failures that left a predator inside a family's safe space. Damien Bendall's rage on 18th September was not sudden lightning. Thunder had rumbled around him for years, yet the warning rolled past unheeded. Born in 1990, Bendall grew up drifting between Derbyshire council estates and small-time crime. By age 15, he had multiple cautions for violence. Teachers described an unblinking stare and sudden outbursts that left classmates bloody-nosed. At 17, he smashed a neighbor's window during a drunken row, earning his first conviction and community service he never completed. His crimes escalated in 2010, a street robbery with a meat cleaver and a brutal clubbing of a taxi driver who refused to waive the fare. Both attacks ended with suspended sentences, judges citing youthful impulsivity and a diagnosis of borderline personality traits. In 2015, Bendall set fire to a stranger's car after an argument in a pub car park. Flames leapt high enough to scorch a row of garages. CCTV caught him laughing as he walked away. This time, he landed in HMP Nottingham for arson and intent to endanger life. Inside, fellow inmates nicknamed him Ghost for pacing cells at night, murmuring about demons, and cleansing fire. A prison psychiatrist noted psychopathic features and recommended intensive therapy. Records show Bendall refused sessions, telling staff he'd sort my own head. Parole papers flagged him as high risk to partners and children. Yet in 2020, amid pandemic staffing shortages, probation service algorithms reclassified him as medium risk, making him eligible for early release on license. Overworked officers handling caseloads of 70+ hardly challenged the downgrade. Released with a 46-pound discharge brand, Bendall couch-surfed until he met Terri Harris through a mutual friend at a local skate park. Terri, recently separated, posted on Facebook about starting fresh. Bendall replied with flattery and promises of steady work. Within weeks, he moved into her small terrace in Chesterfield. Friends worried. Terri was bubbly, Bendall brooding. She loved kids' TikTok dances, he loved war documentaries, and whispered about sorting people. Still, Terri said he treated Lacey and John-Paul like gold, cooking spaghetti hoops and helping with maths homework. Behind closed doors, cracks spread. Lacey confided to a schoolmate that Bendall punched a door after losing a video game, leaving a fist-shaped hole. Connie once texted her mom from a playdate, "Damien yells a lot." Terri's sister noticed bruises on her arm. Terri blames the dog lead. A neighbor heard smashing plates and called police in December 2020, but Terri answered the door smiling, insisting all was fine. Officers noted Bendall smelled of drink, but saw no injuries, so they left. Meanwhile, Bendall breached parole terms, skipping 2 probation meetings and failing a drug test for cocaine. Probation guidelines required recall to prison after 2 breaches, yet paperwork stalled on an overloaded desk. Instead, Bendall received a stern warning letter he never opened. Investigators later found it unopened under his mattress. Early 2021 brought mounting stress. Bendall's construction job ended. He sold power tools to buy cocaine. Dealers fronted him grams on credit. Debts climbed into hundreds, then thousands. Text records show threats. Sort the debt or we sort you. Bendall began carrying Terri's claw hammer in his coat for protection, boasting to mates he'd cave heads if pressed. A friend reported the threat to Crime Stoppers, but the anonymous note faded in a stack of tips. Probation did conduct a home visit in July, discovering Bendall unemployed and struggling. The officer lacked time for a full risk reassessment. She ticked boxes, advised job center attendance, and left after 10 minutes. No one flagged the children's safety. August heat brought heavier drug binges. Bendall sold his Xbox, then pawned Terri's tablet. When she confronted him, neighbors heard him shout, "You and your brats owe me loyalty." Terri texted a friend, "He's scary tonight, might ask him to leave if he doesn't calm." But later messages show she forgave him, posting a selfie of the pair hugging on the sofa. At school, Lacey wrote an essay on My Hero. She picked her mom, calling her strong, even when days are loud. Teachers praised her, unaware that loud meant Bendall's threats vibrating through thin walls. On 11 September, 1 week before the murders, Bendall punched a hole in the bathroom door after a cocaine binge. Terri's bruised lip alarmed her sister, who urged her to seek help. Terri replied, "Kids love him really, and he's trying to quit." On 14 September, Bendall missed another probation check-in. Database logs marked, "No response, follow up next month." The system that should have protected the family lost track of its most dangerous client. Financial pressure tightened. Wages gone, utilities overdue, dealer texts demanding payment. Bendall began Googling pawn gold jewelry Derbyshire. On 17 September, he arranged to sell Terri's necklace but backed out, fearing she'd notice. Database searches on his phone reveal new obsessions: family killed for drug debt, hammer attack sentencing, do children feel pain asleep? The morning of 18 September, Bendall posted on Snapchat a kitchen selfie holding a beer with the caption, "Saturday Vibes." Lacey helped Connie mix cupcake batter. John-Paul planned a FIFA tournament. Terri messaged her sister, "Sleep over tonight, house full of giggles." Hours later, she and the children lay lifeless. Post-arrest interviews painted Bendall's chilling indifference. He told detectives, "It was like smashing eggs, no feeling." Asked why, he shrugged. Stress, coke, voices. Toxicology later showed moderate alcohol and traces of cocaine, but not enough to incapacitate judgment. Experts testified he knew right from wrong. Public outrage zeroed in on systemic failures. Probation's misclassification, missed breach recalls, ignored Crime Stoppers tip. The Justice Secretary ordered an independent review. Headlines read, "Probation Catastrophe, Children Pay the Price." Audit findings revealed Bendall's officer carried 155 cases, double recommended load, and software glitches hid his violent past from newer staff. Funerals drew hundreds. White coffins for the girls, blue for John-Paul, lilac for Terri. Each bore cupcakes painted on the side. The vicar's homily asked, "How many warnings must a system miss before high risk means what it says?" What would you change if a dangerous person slipped through every net? Detectives sealed 18 Chandos Crescent by noon, but the investigation stretched far beyond the blue tape. Scene of crime officers in white suits logged each speck of evidence: blood spatter arcs, cigarette ash, half-drunk beer bottles. The claw hammer, its rubber grip slick with gore, went straight to the forensics lab. Microscopic traces confirmed what eyes already saw: human tissue from 4 different victims. Photos of each strike pattern built a silent timeline. Wide swings on the ground floor, tighter arcs up the stairs, smaller overhead blows above the girls' bunks. While technicians combed the house, cybercrime analysts dissected Bendall's phones. One handset, smashed but recoverable, showed frantic cocaine texts at 2142 and 2146. Another, Terri's old smartphone, contained a grisly series of searches after the murders: pawn shop hours, bus routes to Sheffield, life sentence length UK, and, chillingly, does hammer kill instantly? Browser logs stamped those queries between 2323 and 0302, suggesting Bendall wandered the house for hours, drinking beer and planning next steps, while 4 bodies cooled around him. By Monday morning, police traced the dealer's number: a small-time supplier in nearby Worksop. Under caution, the dealer admitted ignoring Bendall's calls because of unpaid debt. He hadn't imagined the price of silence would be 4 murders. His testimony later reinforced prosecutors' key point: Bendall's rage ignited when cocaine became unreachable. Toxicology results returned on Tuesday. Bendall's blood showed 82 milligrams of alcohol per 100 ml, just under the UK drink-drive limit, and 0.15 micrograms of cocaine per ml, indicating recent use but not enough to impair judgment severely. Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Elaine Porter delivered a blunt assessment. He knew the nature and consequences of his acts. The Crown would rely on that line to block any diminished responsibility plea. Autopsy reports told more horror. Terri suffered 2 blows, one crushing the left parietal bone, another fracturing the jaw. John-Paul took 3 strikes, one while turning, evidenced by defensive cuts on his forearm. Connie's small hands showed no defense. pathologists concluded she was asleep at impact. Lacey's arms bore bruises and a single broken finger. She woke, tried to shield her face. Each child died within seconds, Terri within minutes. The hammer's claw, not its head, delivered most of the fatal force, a detail the prosecution later used to argue intent to maximize trauma. Detectives mapped Bendall's movements after the crime. CCTV captured him at 01:07, walking shirtless into the back garden to smoke. Neighbor security lights flashed, recording his blood-slick torso. At 04:22, he wandered outside again, phone glow illuminating his face while he typed bus route queries. But he never left. Every bus that morning came and went without a passenger matching his appearance. Investigation theory: cocaine crash turned bold escape plan into lethargic paralysis.
Interrogation began the moment officers cuffed him. In the video room, Bendall slouched, still bare-chested. Detective Sergeant Hall asked, "Tell me what happened." Bendall exhaled smoke from a cigarette, requested under custody rights, and replied, "I'm a monster." He declined a solicitor, muttering he would save taxpayers cash. Over 4 hours, he offered fragmented admissions. Couldn't get gear, felt walls close, kids were noise. He never used the victims' names. When shown crime scene photos, he stared blankly, then asked for coffee. With confession, forensic proof, and digital trail, charging Hames swiftly, 4 counts of murder. The magistrate's hearing lasted 5 minutes, case sent to Crown Court. Prosecutors added an aggravating factor: murder of children with a weapon while on license. Maximum sentence: whole life order. Public fury focused on probation failures. Media obtained internal emails showing Bendall's missed appointments and positive drug screens flagged only as to be monitored. The Justice Secretary faced Commons questions. An independent review launched within days. Families demanded accountability, not bureaucratic remorse. In Killamarsh, community grief turned practical. Volunteers delivered meals to relatives. Local builders installed security lights for neighbors spooked by darkness. Stavely Town Council painted 4 benches pink and blue, the children's favorite colors, outside the local skate park. Each bench bore a small plaque: play, laugh, remember. The prosecution team assembled its narrative: Bendall's long violent history, financial desperation, cocaine craving, and systemic oversight. Key exhibits: dealers ignored texts, unsent insurance payout search on Terri's phone, and parole documents labeling him medium risk despite prior arson. Detective Hall rehearsed testimony. "We saw no spontaneity, only a sequence prepared by a hammer placed minutes before." Meanwhile, defense solicitors explored explanations. Psychological experts examined Bendall for frontal lobe dysfunction, but found no tumor or severe lesion. A neurologist noted minor scarring from past head injuries, insufficient for insanity plea. Mitigation shrank to drug intoxication and emotional breakdown, arguments unlikely to sway a jury confronted with the clawhammer photos. On 24 November 2021, Bendall appeared via video from HMP Wakefield for a plea hearing. Courtroom gallery, packed with reporters, fell silent as the clerk read each count. Bendall responded, "Guilty," 4 times, in a voice barely above whisper. Gasps echoed. Some wept. Judge Mr. Justice Sweeney scheduled sentencing for December, ordering a pre-sentence report, but warning, the only realistic outcome is a whole life order. After the plea, attention turned to institutional fixes. Probation Service pledged caseload reduction targets. The Home Office introduced a red flag cascade procedure. Missing 2 appointments or positive Class A drug test triggers auto recall to prison unless a senior manager signs override. Critics called it closing gate after horse has bolted, but unions said extra staff finally funded. As December chill settled, Killamarsh prepared for Christmas with candles in each window, honoring Terri and the children. Schools held a minute's silence. Classmates wrote memory cards hung on a tree outside St. Giles Church. Lacey danced like nobody watched. Connie laughed at my jokes. John-Paul was goalie king. Parents whispered cautionary reminders. Know who lives in your house, check who watches your kids. Could any system guarantee 4 cupcakes stay just cupcakes and not timestamps on a crime scene? The sentencing hearing on 21 December 2021 drew a queue outside Derby Crown Court before dawn. Reporters jostled by metal barricades, their cameras trained on a single prisoner van idling behind high gates. Inside, Damien Bendall sat in a gray tracksuit, wrists cuffed to a waist chain. When the doors clanged open, he shuffled into courtroom 1 under fluorescent glare, head down, jaw clenched. On the public benches, relatives clutching photo lockets braced for the final chapter. Proceedings began with grim efficiency. Prosecutor Louis Mabley recited Bendall's record of arson, robbery, and assault, then walked the court through the Killamarsh timeline. He displayed the hammer in a sealed case, its claw still pitted. Jurors were no longer present, since Bendall's guilty pleas left sentencing to the judge alone. But the gallery needed to see the weapon that had turned a family home into a morgue. Gasps spread as the courtroom screens showed images of bunk beds splattered in crimson, cupcakes untouched on the counter, and Terri's final text still glowing on the display, sent at 9:34 p.m., reading, "Night-night, love you." The prosecutor continued, describing the factors that made the case especially severe. There were multiple child victims. The murders were committed while Bendall was on license. The autopsy revealed evidence of sexual assault. Lacey's injuries suggested Bendall violated her body after death. For a moment, it felt as if the courtroom lost its oxygen. Terri's sister broke down in audible sobs. The prosecutor ended his statement with quiet finality, saying that no minimum term could ever satisfy the interests of justice.
Bendall's defense team did not attempt to reduce the sentence. They gave a brief statement saying he accepted responsibility, acknowledged the pain he had caused, and understood he might never be released. There was no claim of mental illness, no excuses, no appeal to sympathy. Bendall declined to speak. Mr. Justice Sweeney stood to deliver the sentence. His voice was steady as it carried through the oak-paneled room. He told Damien Anthony Bendall that he had committed unspeakable acts against 4 defenseless people, 3 of them children who trusted him. The judge listed the elements of premeditation, brutality, betrayal, and sexual violence. Then came the sentence rarely spoken in British courts. He said Bendall would serve a whole life order. He would die in prison. Bendall gave no outward reaction, but a slow exhale fogged the glass in front of him. The court adjourned. Officers led him away. Outside, relatives embraced. Some collapsed in a mixture of relief and grief that would never fade. Within days, journalists secured a short prison interview with Bendall for a documentary. The broadcast showed him sitting cross-legged on a metal bunk, his eyes dull. When asked why he killed, he answered simply that pressure builds and pipes burst. When asked about drugs, he said cocaine played a part. When asked about regret, he said he couldn't change the day. The monotone stunned viewers. Victim advocates said the interview should never have been aired, but psychologists pointed to it as an example of public safety insight. Some offenders feel nothing after committing atrocities, and systems must never rely on remorse. Later that same month, the government's independent review landed on the Justice Secretary's desk. The 70-page document revealed a chain of failures. One software error had downgraded Bendall's risk level from high to medium because a clerical entry omitted his 2015 arson conviction. His supervising officer had 154 cases, despite guidelines recommending no more than 50. He had skipped 3 appointments and tested positive for cocaine, but staff shortages delayed the response. No one had done a full safeguarding check for the children living in the house. The report concluded that if standard protocols had been followed, Bendall would have been recalled to custody before the murders. Headlines across the country screamed that probation failures had killed 4 people. Parliament held an emergency debate. The Justice Secretary publicly apologized to the victims' families and pledged sweeping reforms. 500 new probation officers were promised. Software would now require a human override before downgrading risk. Any offender with a history of violence moving into a home with children would trigger automatic safeguarding referrals. Derbyshire Constabulary launched Operation Shield to find other licensed offenders living with minors. Within 3 months, 15 were recalled for breaches. Social services introduced a new joint visit system where family liaison workers accompany officers and speak privately with partners and children to ask about fear, arguments, or signs of violence at home, signals that had gone unnoticed in Terri's case. Schools stepped in too. At Lacey's primary school, staff created a system called Safety Signal. Children were invited to write notes each morning and drop them into a locked box using color codes: green if happy, amber if worried, red if they felt unsafe. A counselor read the notes daily. Other schools across Derbyshire soon adopted the same box system, giving children a private way to speak up when home life turned dangerous. Journalists later sought clarity on what exactly a whole life order meant in Bendall's case. In England, such a sentence allows no chance of parole, though offenders may still appeal on narrow procedural grounds. Bendall tried, claiming the aggravating sexual element had not been decided by a jury. The Court of Appeal dismissed it instantly, pointing out that his own guilty plea admitted extreme and sexual violence. The ruling set a new precedent, confirming that judges may impose whole life terms when post-mortem sexual assault is medically proven, even without a jury verdict. Inside the segregation wing at HMP Franklin, Bendall became a subject of clinical study. Psychiatrists observed signs of emotional flatlining, a condition often seen in severe psychopathy. They attempted new therapy models but found no spark of empathy. He asked prison guards for television drama recommendations but never once mentioned the children he had killed.
In Killamarsh, something quiet and healing took root. A memorial garden was built behind St. Giles Church. 4 cherry trees were planted. Each spring, blossoms drift down like soft pink snow onto a bench carved with the words, "Dance, play, laugh, remember." Connie's mother visits every week, leaving small bottles of glitter nail polish at the base of her daughter's tree. Jason Bennett, whose son John-Paul was among the victims, launched a foundation called 4 for Lacey. It now funds self-defense classes and trains youth sports coaches to recognize signs of domestic abuse. John-Paul's football teammates were the first to sign up. Probation reforms began to show early impact. Recall rates for violent offenders under supervision rose by 30%. New child victim incidents among that group dropped. Some warned the data was still too fresh to draw conclusions, but the family saw proof that real change can grow out of even the deepest tragedy. As the first anniversary approached, the village prepared a silent walk. Hundreds of people carried lanterns through the streets, pausing at Chandos Crescent. The house where it happened had been demolished. In its place stood a green square and a single street lamp that stays on all night. At exactly 21:42, the time when Terry's unanswered text triggered Bendall's rage, the crowd dimmed their lanterns and stood in silence, lit only by the steady glow of the lamp. A pastor's voice broke the stillness, saying, "Let this light stand where systems went dark." Could earlier intervention have spared Terri, John-Paul, Lacey, and Connie? The question remains an open wound, but the reforms born in their names now stand guard at other thresholds. Part 4 closes with justice delivered and new protections rising. Part 5 will explore how those reforms are monitored, how survivors turn grief into advocacy, and how the hammer used in the crime may soon take its place behind museum glass as a warning to future generations. The clang of the cell door behind Damien Bendall marked a new chapter for the people left in Killamarsh, sustaining change after the headlines faded. 1 month after the whole life sentence, the Ministry of Justice convened the Killamarsh Implementation Board, tasked with turning the review's 44 recommendations into operational directives. Meeting minutes show urgency. Staffing ratios capped at 60 cases per probation officer, mandatory double sign-off for any risk downgrade, and a digital flag that pins social services whenever a high-risk licensee moves into a household with children under 16. Local authorities moved first. Derbyshire Probation piloted a triage hub nicknamed Red Room. Each morning, 2 officers, a child protection worker, and a mental health nurse scan overnight breach alerts. If any offender on license misses an appointment, fails a drug test, or triggers a Crime Stoppers tip, the Red Room decides within 2 hours: fast-track recall, emergency home visit, or medical referral. Early results stunned auditors. Recall rates for violent offenders doubled, and home visit teams intercepted 3 knives and 1 loaded revolver within 6 weeks. Community groups kept pressure on government promises. Jason Bennett's 4 for Lacey Foundation organized a cupcake ride motor rally. 37 bikers in pink vests traced a 70-mile loop from Killamarsh to Sheffield Probation HQ, delivering a petition for national safe house funding for domestic abuse survivors. Thousands signed. MPs debated the proposal days later. Schools, too, embedded new vigilance. The color-coded safety signal boxes installed after the murders spread across Derbyshire, then Nottinghamshire and South Yorkshire. University researchers studied the pilot. Amber or red notes predicted 72% of verified domestic abuse calls within the same postcode during a 3-month window. Armed with data, councils secured funding for full-time school safety liaisons, former police officers trained to respond when a red note appears. Media interest waned, until a BBC documentary, A Hammer's Echo, aired 6 months after sentencing. The program reenacted Bendall's night with somber narration, but focused on systemic gaps. It ended at the National Justice Museum, where curators unveiled the claw hammer, sealed behind glass next to exhibits on the Soham and Dunblane tragedies. A placard reads, "Failing to act can be fatal." Visitors stood silent before continuing to interactive screens on probation reform, turning voyeuristic true crime into civic lesson. Back in Killamarsh, Chandos Green, the former murder site, blossomed into a pocket park. Landscape architects kept it simple: grass, a loop path, 4 raised flower beds, pink, blue, yellow, purple for each child, and a low granite plinth engraved with Terri's name. Every 18 September, residents gather at dusk. They light battery candles at 2142. The instant Bendall's cocaine text went unanswered. For 1 minute, no one speaks. Then the vicar breaks the silence with 4 words: play, laugh, dance, remember. Children release biodegradable balloons. Parents wipe tears, but also smile. Grief woven into resilience.
Probation reforms rippled nationwide. The new Child Presence Alert flag went live in all 12 English regions. Algorithms can't override it. Only a senior manager, after documented home inspection, may remove the tag. Within a year, 411 licensees cohabiting with minors triggered alerts. 79 were recalled for fresh breaches before harm occurred. Critics warned of intrusion, but surveys found 78% of guardians welcomed the checks. Academic scrutiny followed. The University of Nottingham's criminology team published Cascading Failures, the Killamarsh case. Key finding: the largest predictor of post-release violence was poly-breach inertia, multiple small violations overlooked because each seemed minor. Their proposed fix, automatic escalation after 2 breaches, mirrored Red Room policy, now rolling across England. Advocacy extended online. Connie Gent's mother, in partnership with a digital safety charity, launched Trust Your Gut, text 88440, an SMS line for parents sensing early domestic unease. Within 6 months, it logged 12,000 messages, half requesting information on emergency exit plans. Meanwhile, the Hammer exhibit influenced legislation. An MP who toured the museum tabled the Violent Licensee Disclosure Bill, granting partners of high-risk offenders the right to request full criminal histories, a domestic violence Clare's Law expansion. Debate turned fiery. Privacy campaigners warned of vigilantism. Yet, newspaper polls showed 80% public support, and the Home Secretary signaled backing. Probation caseloads finally eased after new hiring targets, 2,000 officers over 2 years, funded by reallocating prison estate savings. Training modules now open with the Killamarsh timeline. Trainees watch body cam footage of officers entering the silent house, then dissect each missed intervention like medical students studying a fatal case. Jason Bennett channels grief into touring youth clubs, speaking about quiet red flags, holes punched indoors, sudden pet aggression, secret drug deaths. He ends each talk handing out cupcake stickers. Kids stick them on phone cases as a pact. Speak up if a friend's home feels unsafe. 1 year after sentencing, BBC Radio brought Jason and Lacey's favorite teacher together. The teacher recalled Lacey's dream of starting a baking channel. Jason announced the foundation's next step, Lacey's Kitchen, a mobile classroom van teaching baking and domestic abuse awareness. The van rolled out with pastel stripes, staffed by volunteer chefs and counselors. First stop, a Sheffield estate where Crime Stoppers tips spike weekly. Children piped icing while adults received leaflets on probation flags and safety signal boxes. Inside HMP Franklin, Bendall faded from headlines, but his case shaped policy. The prison service classified him Category A high risk, locked down 23 hours a day. Psychologists used him as a control subject for empathy deficit studies. He remains emotionless, but his dossier trains officers to detect brewing danger in other inmates. Outside, statistics track impact. In the 18 months post-reform, Derbyshire saw 0 family murders by licensee offenders, down from an average of 3 per 5-year span. Nationally, recall before harm figures rose. More offenders returned to custody for breaches, fewer tragedies reached the news. Critics fear net widening, supporters argue lives saved. Killamarsh itself no longer flinches at every siren. Children play tag on Chandos Green. A new mural on the community center depicts cupcakes lifting into starlight. Under it reads, "Warning signs matter." Have the reforms solved every risk? No policy can promise that. But the chain of missed chances that led to a hammer in the night has been broken in multiple links: software flags, human overrides, school notes, community vans. And every September, as LED candles glow at 2142, neighbors reaffirm a vow: never again let silence shield brutality. The reforms sparked by Killamarsh soon crossed borders, carried by slides, speeches, and one grim artifact, the claw hammer in its sealed case. In early 2023, the National Justice Museum loaned the exhibit to the European Probation Conference in The Hague. Delegates from 17 countries queued to study its battered head, then sat through a workshop titled Poly-Breach Inertia, Spotting the Fatal Chain. Derbyshire's Red Room model drew particular interest. Within 6 months, pilot triage hubs opened in Dublin, Malmo, and Victoria, Australia. An Irish officer later wrote, "We recalled a violent licensee after his second skipped check-in. 2 weeks later, his ex-partner found a knife stash in the shed. Killamarsh probably saved her life." Across the Atlantic, the U.S. National Institute of Justice hosted a virtual forum where Derbyshire analysts presented the Child Presence Alert flag. American parole boards, long siloed from Child Protective Services, took notes. Oregon became the first state to mirror the alert system, triggering instant home visits when high-risk supervisees move in with minors. Meanwhile, back in England, the first cohort of safety liaison officers graduated, former detectives now stationed in schools to read those color-coded notes. One liaison described an 11-year-old who slipped a red card marked simply hammer. A home visit found her mother's boyfriend polishing tools at 2 a.m., high on meth. Police removed 2 children hours before a planned attack, the kind of pre-dawn horror Killamarsh had already endured. The Trust Your Gut 88440 text line expanded nationwide under Ofcom support. Anonymized data showed patterns: spikes in messages late Friday nights after wage pockets disappeared into dealers' hands. Another surge first of the month when rent came due. Algorithms now push extra crisis counselors online precisely when desperation peaks. Legislatively, Parliament passed the Violent Licensee Disclosure Act, nicknamed Lacey's Law by the tabloids. Partners of serious offenders can now request a full conviction history within 7 days. In its first year, 3,200 applications revealed hidden records. 780 households accepted voluntary safety planning visits. Privacy campaigners protested, but a high court review affirmed the law's proportionality, citing the unique public interest laid bare in R.V. Bendall. By autumn 2024, probation metrics told a quieter story. National child homicides by offenders on license fell from 9 per year to 3. Each number still represented shattered families, yet the downward curve testified to lessons learned. Criminologists cautioned against complacency. Systems sag over time, but acknowledged Killamarsh as a turning point, like Dunblane or Soham before it. At Chandos Green, the cherry trees bloomed a second time, petals drifting onto children racing scooters along the loop path. One of those children, Max, 9, paused to tie a loose lace, then glanced at the plinth. He didn't know Terry's face, but he did know the safety signal box at school. He'd dropped a green card that morning. I feel happy. Progress is measured in such small, ordinary moments that crises once stole. Inside Lacey's kitchen van, cupcake classes now tour 4 counties. Each workshop ends with a simple pledge card stamped by flour-dusted fingers. If I feel fear, I will speak. Counselors discreetly slip extra cards to kids who linger. They've already intercepted 2 amber situations, one father spiraling into gambling debt, another step-parent bringing cocaine into the house. Both families now engaged with support teams before red turned to black. The Hammer exhibit continued its journey, this time to Ottawa for the World Probation Summit. Some delegates questioned showcasing a murder weapon. Did it glorify evil? Survivors saw it differently, a physical warning. Jason Bennett addressed the hall via video, holding a cupcake charm. Tools can build or destroy, he said. Policy is the handle we choose. The room stood in silence, then voted to adopt a multilateral statement on breach escalation standards, referencing Killamarsh by name. Back home, the youngest Candy Boy, now 13, attended the 3rd annual Lantern Walk. He carried a lantern for Connie this year. Her mother had sprained her ankle and asked him to stand in. As 2142 approached, he lifted the light high, wristband gleaming SES. Around him, teenagers who once wrote Amber Notes were now safety mentors, coaching new pupils how to use the boxes. Generational echo, vigilance passed hand to hand. Probation officers no longer start training with generic slides. They begin with a virtual reality walkthrough of 18 Chandos Crescent, recreated from forensic scans. Trainees must click on clues, unopened warning letter, door punch holes, missed appointment logs, each click prompting a reflection. What action here? Failure to act triggers a simulated news bulletin announcing 4 deaths. Early metrics show new officers escalate breaches 35% faster than predecessors. Reporters revisiting the story found less outrage, more steady diligence. Government dashboards publish breach stats monthly. NGOs cross-check for unexplained drops. When a backlog emerged in Leeds, whistleblowers flagged it before tragedy struck. Proof that transparency itself became a safeguard. The claw hammer will return to Derbyshire in 2026, destined for a permanent Hall of Missed Warnings exhibit, beside case files of other preventable crimes. Yet, officials debate whether one day to melt it down, recast the metal into 4 small bells for Chandos Green, symbols of turning harm into harmony. Survivors lean toward keeping it visible. Forgetting, they say, is the first breach. As for Damien Bendall, he remains in segregation, a ghost even other inmates shun. Psychologists report no remorse, no therapy engagement, just requests for thriller novels and extra sugar sachets. His existence is a footnote to the reforms he never intended to inspire. Killamarsh's legacy lives elsewhere, in algorithms that refuse to overlook 2 breaches, in children who know red means unsafe, in partners unafraid to request conviction histories, in dealers who now see text pleas for too white as a crisis cue rather than just a sale. And every 18th September, when the village holds its breath at 2142, the silence is different, not stunned shock, but collective vigilance. Cupcakes cool on counters without fear, bunk bed vigils rise unchecked, and a single lamp on Chandos screen burns steady, casting enough light to remind an entire nation that prevention, once learned, must never sleep.